There were two Brazil lineups before the 1998 World Cup final. One had Ronaldo in it. One did not. That is the detail the match has never fully escaped. Before Brazil faced France at the Stade de France, before Zidane attacked the first corner, before the cameras found Zagallo on the bench, the biggest name in the tournament briefly disappeared from Brazil's starting 11. Ronaldo, the player everyone expected to carry the yellow shirt into another final, was not on the first team sheet. Edmundo was. For a few minutes, the World Cup final seemed to have changed before anyone had kicked a ball. Then the correction came. Ronaldo was back in. The number 9 would start after all. On paper, the problem had been fixed. That made the night stranger. Brazil did not walk into the final with a settled team and a clear story. They walked in with a question already attached to them. The player was there, but the certainty around him had gone. The shirt was there, the name was there, the anthem would still play. Yet, something from the hours before kickoff had already entered the match. And once the game began, Brazil never quite looked free of it. That is why 1998 has never rested easily in Brazilian memory. The result itself was clear. France beat Brazil 3-0. Zidane scored twice with his head from corners. Emmanuel Petit scored late. France became world champions at home, in front of a crowd ready to turn the night into national memory. For France, the final had shape, goals, control, release. For Brazil, the same match never became that simple. The Seleção had not reached Paris by accident. Brazil still had the authority of champions. Cafu and Roberto Carlos gave the team width and force from fullback. Dunga brought the old command in midfield. Rivaldo had become one of the tournament's decisive players. Bebeto remained a link to 1994. Zagallo, on the bench, carried decades of World Cup history inside Brazilian football. This was not a side trying to survive the occasion. It was Brazil, expected to recognize the size of a World Cup final and still impose itself on it. And above all, there was Ronaldo. 4 years earlier, he had been a teenager in the squad that won the World Cup, without needing him on the field. By 1998, he was no longer a promise waiting for his turn. He was the center of Brazil's attack. The player defenders feared in open space, the forward who could make a backline retreat just by receiving the ball on the half-turn. For viewers who did not live through that tournament, the scale matters. Ronaldo was not simply a brilliant striker having a good month. He had become the new image of Brazilian genius. Faster, stronger, more direct, still capable of making football feel improvised. In the most dangerous part of the pitch. The shaved head, the low burst of speed, the yellow shirt moving toward goal. He was easy to recognize, and hard to separate from the idea of Brazil itself. So when his name disappeared from the team sheet, it did not feel like a normal selection change. It felt as if the tournament's central image had flickered. And when he returned, the match did not return to normal with him. From the first minutes, France looked present. They were the hosts, but they did not play like a team crushed by the weight of the occasion. Their midfield had balance. Their defenders challenged with conviction. Their crowd gave the night its noise, but the players kept their shape inside it. Brazil looked different. That is the part that stayed with so many Brazilian supporters. Losing a World Cup final hurts, but Brazil had lost before. The Seleção has never been protected from defeat. What disturbed people in 1998 was the sight of a Brazil team looking slow to feel the match, slow to answer it, slow to become themselves. There are defeats where a team plays well and loses. There are defeats where the opponent is simply better. Paris felt like something else. Brazil seemed slightly absent from their own final. France's first goal came from a corner. Zidane moved into the space and scored with his head. In another match, it might have been remembered as a simple failure of marking. In this one, it felt as though the night had already shown its direction. France were awake, Brazil were late. Brazil still had time. They had Ronaldo on the pitch, Rivaldo near him, Roberto Carlos breaking from deep, Cafu on the other side. They had enough talent to disturb any final, but the attacks did not gather force. The ball moved without rhythm. Runs opened and closed without conviction. The yellow shirts were visible, but the old threat was not. Ronaldo was on the pitch, and yet not quite there. It is easy to be unfair here, because he did play. He ran, pressed, challenged, tried to enter the game. But the Ronaldo of that final was not the Ronaldo people had watched earlier in the tournament. He did not seem like a player imposing himself on the night. He seemed like a player trying to reach a version of himself that would not fully arrive. The cameras kept finding him. That mattered. By 1998, the World Cup was no longer just a tournament watched by millions. It was a television event, searching for meaning as the game unfolded. Every Ronaldo gesture became evidence. A slow walk, a tired look, a missed touch, a moment away from the ball. On another night, these might have been ordinary details in a difficult match. Because of the confusion before kickoff, they became part of the mystery. Brazil were not only chasing France, they were playing inside the shadow of their own pre-match uncertainty. Then Zidane scored again. Another corner, another header. France doing the simple things with more clarity. At 2-0, the scoreline already looked heavy, but the feeling was heavier than the numbers. The goals seemed to confirm what the evening had suggested from the beginning. Brazil were there, but not fully there. The second half did not repair the image. Marcel Desailly was sent off, and France went down to 10 men. In another Brazilian story, that would have been the opening. The field stretches, the ball finds the right foot, the great player changes the course of the match. But nothing in Brazil's play suggested the final was waiting to turn. Even the extra man did not give Brazil the order the match required. The problem was no longer only space on the pitch. It was whether Brazil could find enough rhythm to use it. France held. Brazil pushed without conviction. The match moved toward its ending, with a strange lack of Brazilian force. When Petit scored the third in stoppage time, it gave France the finish their night deserved. A break forward, a low shot, the release of a country about to win its first World Cup. For France, the final became complete. For Brazil, the whistle did not close the story. It opened it. The players in yellow stood on the pitch, beaten clearly, but not explained clearly. Ronaldo had played, he had started, he had stayed on the field, and still, the central question remained: what had happened before the match? That question became the afterlife of the final. Over time, the details would be repeated, disputed, and rearranged. Illness, a reported convulsion, medical checks, decisions inside the camp, the role of the coaching staff, the authority of doctors, the weight around Ronaldo as a global star. Some parts became known, others stayed uncertain. And because Brazil's performance had looked so strange, every gap seemed to matter. This is where Ronaldo became more than a player in the memory of 1998. He became the figure in whom the whole final could be stored. Not because he alone lost it. That would be too simple and too harsh. France were excellent. Brazil defended badly. The midfield did not settle. The team did not respond well to the night. Football still happened, and France earned what they won. But memory does not preserve matches only by tactical responsibility. It keeps them by the feeling they leave behind. And the feeling Brazil left in Paris was not only disappointment, it was disorientation. Ronaldo's body gave that disorientation a visible form. A team can look tired, but a single body can be watched. A set of decisions can be hidden inside hotel rooms, medical conversations, corridors, and dressing room pauses. A center forward walking into the World Cup final, after disappearing from the first team sheet, gives the public something to hold on to. That is why the mystery survived. Not because it has one clean answer waiting to end the story, but because the final itself felt as if it had begun. before the public was allowed into it. Brazilian football has always carried a belief in the saving power of the exceptional player. That does not mean the country ignores teams, coaches, or tactics. But the imagination of the seleção often returns to the player who breaks the match open when the plan has tightened. Pelé, Garrincha, Romário, Ronaldo. Different eras, different bodies, but the same emotional habit. When the game closes, someone in yellow might still find a way through. In 1998, that belief met a harder condition. Ronaldo was expected to be that player, even when the hours before kickoff suggested that the person inside the shirt might not be ready to carry it. The final needed the image of Ronaldo, the starter, the star, the face of Brazil, the guarantee that the story still made sense. But football is played by bodies, not images. And bodies do not always obey the calendar. A World Cup final does not wait. The stadium is full. The broadcast is set. The opponent is ready. The team sheet must be delivered. The anthem must begin. The match must happen at the hour assigned to it. Around the player, everything asks for certainty. Inside the player, there may be none. That is the uncomfortable part Paris revealed. Brazil were not only representing a country's football memory, they were moving inside a global event with television audiences, commercial partners, branding, contracts, and a star whose value reached far beyond the pitch. None of that needs to be imagined as a conspiracy to matter. It was enough that it existed around the team at the exact moment when the team needed clarity. The old story would have been simple. The genius rises, Brazil follow, and the shirt becomes larger than the problem. In Paris, the shirt did not make the problem disappear. The number 9 was on the pitch, but the certainty people attached to it had broken. That is why the defeat did not feel like a normal football failure. It showed the fragility inside a role that had seemed almost untouchable. France did not need to solve Brazil's mythology. They only had to play the match in front of them. They attacked corners. They competed in midfield. They kept Ronaldo from becoming the figure Brazil needed. Their clarity made Brazil's confusion more visible. Every French action seemed to belong to the same night. Too many Brazilian actions seemed to belong somewhere else. There is a temptation to make 1998 only about what happened to Ronaldo. It is understandable. He was the clearest figure, the most famous player, the body around which the question formed. But if the story stops there, it misses why the final still feels larger than one player's illness or one coach's decision. The deeper unease is that Brazil appeared in that final caught inside obligations. To play, to explain, to start the star, to keep the shape of the event intact, to move toward kickoff, even when the human center of Brazil's story had become uncertain. And still, the football has to remain first. Zidane's headers were goals before they were symbols. Brazil's marking failed. France's delivery was good. The crowd roared because the ball went in. The match belonged first to the players who played it, and France won because they performed better under the lights. But afterward, the football and the surrounding story could not be separated. If Brazil had played well and lost, the pre-match confusion might have become a strange footnote. If Ronaldo had been left out and Brazil had won, the story might have turned into a different legend. If France had won narrowly, the mystery might have stayed softer. But Brazil lost heavily, and they lost while looking unlike themselves. That gave the hours before kickoff a permanent place inside the match. The final whistle did not end the uncertainty. It gave it a scoreline. For Brazil, the seleção has never been just another team. It has often carried an argument about beauty, talent, pressure, recognition, and the country's place in the world. By 1998, that meaning had changed from the older eras, but it had not disappeared. When Brazil reached a World Cup final with Ronaldo at the front, another version of the old promise seemed to be arriving. Then the promise appeared on the team sheet, disappeared, returned, and played a final that never felt whole. That is why Paris still resists closure. People can accept that France were better. They can accept that Brazil defended poorly. They can accept that Ronaldo was not himself. What remains harder to settle is the feeling that the public watched only the visible part of a decision, already shaped elsewhere. A World Cup final usually offers the illusion that everything important will happen on the pitch. In 1998, Brazil broke that illusion. The pitch still mattered, but it no longer seemed to contain the whole truth of the night. Something from the hotel room, the medical room, the corridor, the revised team sheet, entered the grass with the players. In the years that followed, Ronaldo's story moved beyond Paris. He suffered injuries, returned, and in 2002, became the central figure of Brazil's fifth World Cup title. That later triumph offered a kind of closure. It allowed Brazilian memory to place 1998 inside a longer arc, but it did not erase the final. Paris remains separate because it captured a different truth. Not the return of a great player, but the moment when greatness looked vulnerable to everything placed around it. Ronaldo in 2002 could smile with the trophy. Ronaldo in 1998 remains harder to look at, because he stands between what he was expected to represent and what his body could provide that night. Brazil's loss became unforgettable because it showed a limit to talent, a limit to mythology, a limit to the belief that the yellow shirt could absorb every disturbance and still produce football on command. France lifted the trophy, and rightly so. Their final had a beginning, a performance, and a release. Brazil's final had a beginning that never stopped beginning. That is why the first team sheet still matters. In that missing name, and in its return, the match revealed its wound before anyone had scored. Ronaldo came back into the 11, but the certainty did not come back with him. The scoreboard said 3-0. The memory said something had been wrong before the football even started.